Over the next month, Elena visited Henry regularly at his home on Martinez Hill. What had started as friendship between a struggling teenager and a lonely old man had become something deeper, a bond between two people who truly understood each other's hearts. Henry's house no longer intimidated Elena. She learned that despite its size, it was simply a home where a man lived quietly with his memories. The formal dining room went unused, Henry preferring to eat simple meals in the kitchen while he told Elena stories about his life with Rosa. The grand library became their favorite place to sit and talk, surrounded by books that Rosa had collected over the years. During these visits, Elena began to understand the full scope of Henry's life. He showed her photo albums filled with pictures of the farm in its early days, when he and Rosa worked the land themselves with just a few hired hands. He explained how they had gradually expanded, buying neighboring properties when times were good, always treating their workers fairly and sharing their success with the community. Rosa insisted we give back, Henry told Elena one afternoon as they looked through old photographs. She said we were blessed with good fortune, and it was our responsibility to help others who weren't so lucky. Every year we would sit down and decide how much we could donate to schools, hospitals, and families in need. Elena studied a photograph of Rosa standing in front of the town's library, holding a giant pair of scissors at what was obviously a ribbon-cutting ceremony. She looked so happy in these pictures. She was happiest when she was helping people, Henry smiled sadly. I kept up the donations after she died, but it wasn't the same. I was just writing checks, not really connecting with the people we were helping. Rosa always made sure we knew the families personally, understood their real needs. As Elena learned more about Henry's past, he was quietly learning about her present situation. He asked gentle questions about her family, her school, and her dreams for the future. Elena found herself opening up about things she had never shared with anyone. Her fear that Abuela Rosa was getting sicker, her worry about Miguel growing up too fast, and her secret dream of becoming a teacher someday. A teacher, Henry repeated thoughtfully. Rosa always said teachers were the most important people in any community. They shaped the future by shaping young minds. I used to help other kids with their homework when I had time, Elena explained. I love seeing that moment when someone finally understands something difficult. But college costs so much money, and I need to work to help my family. It's probably just a dream. Henry listened to these conversations with growing determination. Elena reminded him so much of Rosa at that age, kind, selfless, and full of potential that deserved to flourish. He began to form a plan, but he knew he had to be careful. Elena's pride was one of the things he most admired about her, but it also meant she would never accept charity. As spring arrived, Henry's health improved, and he began accompanying Elena on walks around the property. He showed her the farming operations, introduced her to his workers, and explained how the business had grown over the decades. Elena was amazed by how respectfully the workers treated Henry, and how he knew all their names and asked about their families. Mr. Henry helped my son get into college, one of the farm workers, Carlos, told Elena during one of their walks. When Miguel couldn't afford the tuition, Mr. Henry quietly paid for it, said every hardworking family deserved a chance at education. Elena looked at Henry with new understanding. This was what he and Rosa had been doing for decades, quietly changing lives without seeking recognition or gratitude. One evening in late April, Henry asked Elena to stay for dinner. Mrs. Lopez had prepared Elena's favorite meal, and they ate. In the kitchen, as they usually did, talking about Elena's upcoming high school graduation. I can't believe I'm actually going to graduate, Elena said. 3 years ago, when my parents died, I thought I might have to drop out to work full-time. But Miguel kept pushing me to stay in school, and Abuela Rosa insisted education was the most important thing. They were right, Henry said. And you should be proud of yourself, Elena. Working 2 jobs while maintaining excellent grades shows incredible strength and determination. After dinner, Henry walked Elena to the front porch, where they often sat and watched the sunset over the valley. But tonight he seemed nervous, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Elena, Henry began carefully, I've been thinking a lot about legacy lately. When Rosa and I realized we wouldn't have children, we decided our legacy would be the good we could do for others. The scholarships, the buildings, the help we gave to families. That was how we chose to live on after we were gone. Elena nodded, sensing that Henry was building up to something important. The thing is, Henry continued, legacy isn't just about money or buildings. It's about values, about kindness, about the way we treat each other. You've reminded me of those values, Elena. Through our friendship, you've given me something I thought I had lost forever. What's that? Elena asked softly. Purpose, Henry said simply. The joy of caring about someone and being cared about in return. The satisfaction of knowing that kindness still exists in the world. Henry pulled an envelope from his pocket. Elena, I want to give you something, but I need you to promise me you'll listen to my whole explanation before you say no. Elena looked at the envelope suspiciously. Henry, if this is money, you know I can't accept it. Please, Henry said, just listen. Tomorrow morning the town is going to announce a new scholarship program. It's called the Rosa Martinez Memorial Scholarship. In honor of my wife's belief in the power of education, this scholarship will cover full tuition, books and living expenses for one student each year who demonstrates both academic excellence and exceptional character. Elena's eyes widened as she began to understand. The selection committee has already met, Henry continued. They reviewed applications from graduating seniors across the county. The first recipient of the Rosa Martinez Memorial Scholarship is a young woman who works 2 jobs to support her sick grandmother and younger brother, while maintaining a 3.8 grade point average and volunteering in her community whenever possible. Elena's hands began to shake. Henry, you can't. The scholarship committee was particularly impressed. Henry went on, his voice growing emotional, by the recommendation letter from Mrs. Johnson, your English teacher. She wrote about a student who embodies the values of compassion, determination, and selflessness that my wife held dear. Elena started to cry, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Henry was offering. This isn't charity, Elena, Henry said gently. This is an investment in the future. Rosa always believed that educating good people was the best way to make the world better. You're exactly the kind of person she would have wanted to help. But everyone will know you chose me because we're friends. Elena protested through her tears. Henry smiled. Actually, the selection committee doesn't know about our friendship. Mrs. Johnson nominated you months ago before you and I ever met. The committee made their decision based purely on your merits. I just made sure the timing worked out perfectly. Elena looked at the envelope in her hands, still unable to fully believe what was happening. There's more, Henry said quietly. I've arranged for a small cottage on the property to be available for your grandmother. It's fully accessible for someone with her health conditions, and Mrs. Lopez can help with her care. Miguel can attend the private academy in town. They've already agreed to provide him with a full scholarship. Henry, Elena whispered, this is too much. I don't know how to ever repay you. You already have, Henry replied. You gave a lonely old man something to live for again. You showed me that friendship and kindness still exist in the world. You reminded me of what Rosa and I always believed, that the best things in life can't be bought. They can only be given freely. 5 years later, Elena graduated from the state university with a degree in elementary education. She returned to her hometown to teach at the school where she had once struggled to concentrate on her studies because she was hungry. On her first day of class, Elena found a note on her desk from Henry. It read, Rosa would be so proud. Welcome home, teacher. Elena. That afternoon, Elena drove up to Martinez Hill to visit Henry, as she had done countless times over the years. She found him in his garden, tending to the roses that Rosa had planted decades earlier. How was your first day? Henry asked with a smile. Perfect, Elena replied. I have 23 students, and I'm determined to help every single one of them believe in their dreams, just like you helped me believe in mine. Henry nodded with satisfaction. That's exactly what Rosa would have wanted. You're not just a teacher, Elena. You're continuing her legacy of changing lives through education and kindness. Elena looked out over the valley where she had grown up, where she had struggled, and where she had found an unlikely friendship that changed everything. The town looked the same, but she knew that in classrooms and homes throughout the community, Henry's quiet generosity continued to create opportunities for families like hers had been. "Thank you, Henry," Elena said, taking his arm as they walked toward the house. "For everything." "Thank you, Elena," Henry replied, "for reminding an old man that the simplest act of kindness can change two lives forever." Elena noticed something was different by Thursday of the following week. She had been looking forward to her usual encounters with Henry, but he was nowhere to be found. She checked the pharmacy where they often met, walked by the post office during her lunch break, and even stopped by the grocery store on her way to work. No sign of him anywhere. By Friday, Elena started to worry. Henry was in his 80s, lived alone, and had mentioned having some health issues. What if something had happened to him? What if he had fallen in his house and no one knew? The thought kept her awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Miguel slept peacefully beside her. Saturday morning, Elena decided she could not wait any longer. She had to find out if Henry was okay. The problem was, she realized she knew almost nothing about where he actually lived. He had mentioned living outside town on some family property, but that could be anywhere in the rural area that surrounded their small community. After her morning cleaning job, instead of going home to rest like she usually did on weekends, Elena walked to the town's main diner where the older residents often gathered for coffee. If anyone would know about Henry Martinez, it would be the people who had lived in town for decades. She approached Mrs. Williams, an elderly woman who seemed to know everyone and everything that happened in town. Mrs. Williams was sitting with two other women drinking coffee and sharing what looked like local gossip. "Excuse me, Mrs. Williams," Elena said politely. "I'm looking for someone and I was hoping you might know him. His name is Henry Martinez and he's probably in his 80s. Mrs. Williams looked up with surprise. "Henry Martinez? You mean old Henry? What would a young girl like you want with him?" "He's my friend," Elena said simply. "I haven't seen him around town this week and I'm worried something might have happened to him." The three women exchanged looks that Elena could not quite understand. Mrs. Williams leaned forward with curiosity. "Your friend? Child, do you know who Henry Martinez is?" Elena felt confused. "He's just Henry. He lives outside town somewhere, and he comes to town sometimes for errands. Why? Is there something wrong?" Mrs. Patterson, one of the other women, laughed softly. "Honey, Henry Martinez owns half this county. That old man you're talking about lives up in the big house on Martinez Hill. He's probably the richest person in our entire state." Elena felt like the world had stopped spinning. "That's impossible. Henry is he's just a regular old man. He needs help reading prescriptions and carrying groceries. He lives simply and he's worth millions of dollars," Mrs. Williams finished. "That Martinez property has been in his family for over 100 years. He owns thousands of acres of farmland, rental properties all over the county, and I heard he even has investments in the city. Plus, he's the one who donated money to build our new library, the school computer lab, and half the equipment at the hospital." Elena sat down heavily in an empty chair trying to process this information. The humble, lonely man who struggled with grocery shopping and lived on frozen dinners was actually the town's biggest benefactor. "But he seems so ordinary," Elena said weakly. Mrs. Patterson nodded. "That's just his way. After his wife Rosa died about 5 years ago, he became real private. Stopped coming to town events, stopped socializing. Most folks only see him when he has business to take care of, and even then he keeps to himself. His wife was the social one," Mrs. Williams added. "Beautiful woman Rosa Martinez. She organized charity events, helped families in need, always made sure Henry stayed connected to the community. When she passed, it was like he just disappeared from public life." Elena's mind was racing. All those times Henry had seemed grateful for her help. All those small gifts he had left for her family. The way he talked about having too much food at the farmer's market. He had been quietly helping her while pretending to be just another elderly man who needed assistance. "Where did you say he lives?" Elena asked, though she was not sure she had the courage to go there. "Martinez Hill." Mrs. Williams pointed toward the east side of town. "You can't miss it. Big white house on top of the hill surrounded by farmland. But honey, You can't just show up at Henry Martinez's door. That's a private man living in a big, important house. Elena thanked the women and left the diner with her head spinning. She walked home slowly, trying to understand everything she had just learned. Henry Martinez was not just some lonely old man who needed help with errands. He was Henry Martinez, the person whose name was on buildings throughout their town. But then Elena remembered his genuine loneliness, the way his face lit up when he saw her, how he talked about missing his wife and having no family. Rich or not, Henry was still the same person she had been spending time with. He was still alone, still missing his wife, still grateful for friendship. That evening, Elena made a decision. She told Abuela Rosa that she was going for a walk and headed toward the east side of town. The walk to Martinez Hill took almost an hour, mostly uphill along a winding road that she had never traveled before. As she got closer, Elena began to understand the scope of Henry's wealth. She passed vast fields of crops, fences that seemed to go on forever, and farm equipment that looked expensive and well-maintained. Workers were finishing their day, loading tools into trucks and heading home. Finally, Elena reached the top of the hill and saw the house. It was not a mansion exactly, but it was certainly the largest home she had ever seen. The White House sat surrounded by beautiful gardens, with a long driveway and views of the entire valley below. Several cars were parked near what looked like a separate building, probably where farm workers or staff conducted business. Elena almost turned back. This was clearly the home of a very important person, and she felt out of place in her worn jeans and old sneakers. But then she thought about Henry, alone in that big house, and she found the courage to walk up the driveway. She knocked on the front door, her heart pounding. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing a middle-aged woman in a clean apron. "Can I help you?" the woman asked, looking surprised to see a teenager at the door. "I'm looking for Mr. Henry Martinez," Elena said. "My name is Elena, and I'm his friend." The woman's expression softened. "Oh, you must be Elena. Mr. Henry has mentioned you many times. I'm Mrs. Lopez, his housekeeper. Please come in. Mr. Henry has been under the weather this week, but I know he'll want to see you." Elena followed Mrs. Lopez through rooms that were larger than her entire apartment. The house was beautiful but felt lived in and comfortable, not like a museum. Family photographs covered tables and walls, and Elena recognized Rosa from Henry's descriptions. "He's been resting in the sitting room," Mrs. Lopez explained as they walked. "He caught a cold early this week and hasn't felt well enough to go into town. He's been worried that his friends would think he was avoiding them." They entered a cozy room where Henry was sitting in a large armchair, reading a book with a magnifying glass. When he looked up and saw Elena, his face transformed with joy and surprise. "Elena, my dear girl, what are you doing here? How did you find me?" Elena felt all her nervousness disappear when she saw his familiar, kind smile. "I was worried about you, Henry, when I didn't see you in town this week. I thought something might have happened." Henry's eyes filled with tears. "You were worried? About me? You came all this way just to check on an old man?" "Of course I did," Elena said, sitting in the chair across from him. "You're my friend. Friends worry about each other." Henry was quiet for a long moment, looking at Elena with an expression she had never seen before. Finally, he spoke. "Elena, I need to tell you something. I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." Elena smiled gently. "I know, Henry. I found out today that you're not exactly the poor old man who needs help with groceries." Henry looked embarrassed. "You're not angry that I deceived you?" "You didn't deceive me," Elena said. "You just didn't tell me you were rich. But you never lied about who you are inside. You're still the same lonely man who misses his wife and appreciates friendship. That part was real, wasn't it?" Henry nodded, his voice thick with emotion. "That was completely real, Elena. These past few months getting to know you, having someone to talk to and care about, it's been the best thing that's happened to me since Rosa died." Elena looked around the beautiful room and then back at Henry. "So why do you live like this but act like you need help in town? Why not just tell people who you are?" Henry sighed, deeply. When you have money, Elena, it changes how people treat you. They want things from you, or they treat you different because they think you're better than them. After Rosa died, I tried to stay connected to people, but everyone either wanted donations or treated me like I was some kind of important person they couldn't relate to. But with you, Henry continued, I could just be Henry. Just an old man who needed help crossing the street or reading a prescription. You saw me as a person, not as a bank account or a name on a building. For the first time in years, I felt like someone cared about me, not my money. Elena understood now why Henry had seemed so genuine, so grateful for simple kindness. In a world where his wealth probably made normal relationships difficult, she had offered him something precious, friendship without conditions. Well, Elena said with a small smile, Elena arrived at the diner 15 minutes late that Tuesday evening, her hair still damp from the rain and her sneakers squeaking on the floor. Mr. Garcia looked up from behind the counter with his usual stern expression, but when he saw her genuinely apologetic face, he just shook his head and pointed toward the back room where her apron was hanging. Next time, call me before you're late, he said, but his tone was not as angry as she had expected. Mrs. Patterson has been waiting for someone to take her order. Elena quickly tied her apron and grabbed her order pad, grateful that she still had a job. As she served coffee and took orders that evening, she found herself thinking about Henry. She wondered if he had finished his business at the bank safely and made it home before the storm got worse. Something about his gentle manner and the way he talked about his late wife had touched her heart. 3 days later, Elena was walking home from school when she spotted a familiar figure outside the town's small pharmacy. Henry was standing near the entrance, holding a small piece of paper and looking confused again. This time the sun was shining, but he seemed just as lost as he had been in the rain. Elena approached him with a smile. "Hello, Mr. Henry. How are you doing today?" Henry's face brightened immediately when he recognized her. "Elena, what a pleasant surprise. I was just trying to read this prescription, but the writing is so small and I forgot my reading glasses at home." Elena looked at the paper in his hands. The doctor's handwriting was indeed difficult to read, with long medical words that would challenge anyone. "Would you like me to help you figure out what it says?" "Oh, would you? That would be wonderful," Henry said, handing her the prescription. "My doctor gave this to me for my arthritis, but I want to make sure the pharmacist gets the right medicine." Elena carefully read the prescription aloud, explaining each medication and when Henry was supposed to take it. She even helped him ask the pharmacist questions about side effects and whether he should take the pills with food. Henry listened carefully, occasionally asking Elena to repeat something or clarify what the pharmacist meant. When they finished at the pharmacy, Henry seemed hesitant to say goodbye. "Elena, would you mind walking with me for a few minutes? I don't get much chance to talk with young people, and you remind me so much of my late wife when she was your age." Elena had about 20 minutes before her shift at the diner, so she agreed. They walked slowly down Main Street, with Henry pointing out buildings and sharing memories about how the town used to look decades ago. "That building there used to be a movie theater," Henry said, pointing to what was now a small clothing store. "My wife and I had our first date there in 1962. We saw Lawrence of Arabia. She fell asleep halfway through, but she never told me until years later because she didn't want to hurt my feelings." Elena laughed. "That sounds like something my grandmother would do. She's always trying to protect people's feelings, even about little things." "How is your grandmother doing?" Henry asked with genuine concern. "You mentioned she was sick when we met the other day." Elena's smile faded slightly. "She has good days and bad days. The doctors say her heart is getting weaker and the medicine is expensive. But we're managing." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "Taking care of family is the most important thing in life. Money comes and goes, but family is forever." Over the next few weeks, Elena began running into Henry regularly around town. It was almost like he appeared whenever she needed a break from her busy schedule. Sometimes he was at the grocery store, struggling to reach items on high shelves. Other times he was at the post office, confused about postal forms or needing help reading small print. Each time, Elena helped without question. She carried his groceries to his old pickup truck, filled out forms for him, and even helped him count change when his arthritis made handling coins difficult. Henry always thanked her warmly and seemed genuinely happy to see her. During one of these encounters at the grocery store, Elena noticed Henry buying very simple food: bread, canned soup, frozen dinners for one person. His cart looked lonely, just like he sometimes seemed. "Do you cook much at home?" Elena asked as they waited in the checkout line. Henry chuckled sadly. "I never learned to cook properly. My wife handled all the meals for 50 years. Now I mostly just heat things up in the microwave. Not very exciting, but it keeps me fed." Elena felt a pang of sympathy. That evening, she convinced Abuela Rosa to help her make extra soup, and the next day she brought a container to Henry when she found him at the hardware store, looking confused about different types of light bulbs. "My grandmother made too much soup last night," Elna lied smoothly, handing him the warm container. "She always cooks like she's feeding an army, and we can't eat it all before it goes bad." Henry's eyes filled with gratitude as he accepted the soup. "This is incredibly kind of you, Elena. I haven't had homemade soup since my wife passed away. Please tell your grandmother I said thank you." The following week, Elena found a small bag of fresh vegetables on the steps outside her apartment building. There was no note, but somehow she knew they were from Henry. When she saw him next, she thanked him, and he just winked and said he had bought too many at the farmer's market. This quiet exchange of kindness continued for weeks. Elena would bring Henry leftover food or help him with errands, and he would leave small gifts, sometimes fruit, sometimes a book he thought she might enjoy, once even a warm scarf when the weather turned cold again. Henry began sharing more stories about his life. He told Elena about growing up during harder times when families helped each other without question. He talked about his wife, Rosa, and how they had worked together to build something meaningful with their lives. Rosa always said that the measure of a person is not what they have, but what they give, Henry told Elena one afternoon as they sat on a bench outside the library. "She would have loved you, Elena. You have the same generous heart she had." Elena felt honored by the comparison. "I wish I could have met her. She sounds like an amazing woman." "She was," Henry said quietly. "We were married for 48 years and I still miss her every day. Sometimes I talk to her picture at home, telling her about my day. I know it sounds silly." "It doesn't sound silly at all," Elena assured him. "Love doesn't end just because someone dies. My parents have been gone for 3 years, but I still talk to them sometimes too." Henry looked at Elena with new understanding. "You've experienced real loss at such a young age. That explains your wisdom and compassion." During another conversation, Henry mentioned how quiet his house felt, and how he sometimes went days without talking to anyone except the mailman. Elena realized that their chance meetings probably meant more to Henry than she had understood. "Don't you have any family nearby?" Elena asked gently. "Rosa and I never had children," Henry explained. "We tried for years, but it just wasn't meant to be. We poured all our love into each other and into helping other people. Now that she's gone, I don't have anyone to share things with or pass my stories on to." Elena felt her heart ache for this lonely old man who had so much love to give but no one to receive it. "Well, you can always share your stories with me," she said. "I like hearing about the old days, and I think your wife sounds wonderful." Henry's face lit up with joy. "Really? You don't think I'm just a boring old man rambling about the past?" "Not at all," Elena said sincerely. "You've lived through so much history. Your stories help me understand how things used to be and how much things have changed." As winter approached, their friendship deepened. Henry looked forward to their encounters, and Elena found that spending time with him gave her a sense of peace in her otherwise hectic life. He listened to her worries about school and family without judgment, offering gentle advice when she asked for it. One afternoon, when Elena was particularly stressed about an upcoming exam and worried about Abuela Rosa's worsening condition, Henry shared something that surprised her. "You know, Elena, I've lived a long time and I've learned that sometimes the worst situations can lead to the best opportunities. When we lost our farm to drought back in the 70s, I thought our world was ending. But it forced us to try new things and eventually we built something even better." Elena looked at him curiously. "You had a farm?" I thought you lived in town. Henry seemed to catch himself as if he had said too much. Oh, just a small place outside town. Nothing fancy. The point is, don't give up hope. Things have a way of working out, especially for people who work as hard as you do. Elena nodded, taking comfort in his words. She had no idea that this humble, kind man who struggled with reading glasses and grocery shopping was actually watching over her in ways she could never imagine. And Henry, for his part, was rediscovering the joy of having someone to care about, someone who saw him not as a wealthy landowner, but simply as a friend who needed companionship as much as she did. Tuesday started like any other day for Elena, but the weather had other plans. By afternoon, dark clouds rolled in fast, and rain began falling in heavy sheets. She sat in her last class of the day, watching water stream down the classroom windows, while her math teacher explained equations that seemed less important than the growing puddles outside. The bell rang at 3:15 p.m., and Elena gathered her books quickly. She had exactly 45 minutes to get home, check on Abuela Rosa and Miguel, grab her work apron and make it to the diner. Mr. Garcia was understanding about many things, but being late was not one of them. In a small town where jobs were hard to find, Elena could not afford to lose this one. She stepped outside and immediately felt the cold rain soak through her thin school jacket. Other students ran past her, some climbing into cars where parents waited with heaters running, others hurrying toward the school buses. Elena pulled her hood up and started walking, her worn sneakers splashing through puddles that seemed to appear everywhere. The rain was coming down harder now, and Elena found herself walking faster than usual. The streets were busier than normal, with cars moving slowly through the storm, and their headlights reflecting off the wet pavement. She was thinking about whether they had enough soup at home for dinner, when something caught her attention near the town's main intersection. An elderly man stood at the corner, looking confused and soaked to the bone. He was probably in his 80s, with white hair plastered to his head and an old wooden cane that he gripped tightly. His clothes were simple, dark pants and a gray sweater that looked like it had seen many years. What struck Elena most was how lost he appeared, turning his head left and right as cars rushed past him. Elena had been taught to mind her own business and keep moving, especially when she was running late. But something about the old man reminded her of her grandfather, who had died when she was 8. He used to get confused sometimes too, especially in busy places with lots of noise and movement. She stopped walking and watched for a moment. The man took a small step toward the street, then stepped back as a truck honked its horn. He tried again, but a car sped past, splashing water from a puddle. The poor man wiped his face with a shaking hand and looked around helplessly. Elena checked the time on her phone. She was already cutting it close, but she could not just walk away. Her grandmother had always told her that helping others was never the wrong choice, even when it was inconvenient. She took a deep breath and walked toward the corner. "Excuse me, sir," Elena called out, raising her voice over the sound of the rain and traffic. "Are you okay? Do you need help crossing the street?" The old man turned toward her with surprised eyes. Up close, Elena could see that he had kind features, though his face showed the worry of someone who was not sure what to do next. His clothes were completely soaked, and he was shivering slightly. "Oh, hello there," he said, his voice gentle, but a little shaky. "I'm trying to get across to the bank, but these cars, they go so fast and I cannot see very well in this rain." He held up his cane and smiled apologetically. "I'm not as quick as I used to be." Elena looked at the intersection. It was indeed busy, with cars rushing to get home before the storm got worse. The crosswalk signal was short, and the old man would definitely need more time than it allowed. "I'm going that direction anyway," Elena lied smoothly. The bank was actually 2 blocks out of her way, but the man did not need to know that. "Would you like me to walk with you? We can wait for a good break in the traffic." The relief on his face made Elena forget all about being late for work. "That would be very kind of you, young lady. I'm Henry, by the way, Henry Martinez." "I'm Elena," she replied, taking a position beside him. "Let's wait for the light to change and make sure we have plenty of time." They stood together at the corner, and Elena noticed that Henry's hands were shaking. Whether from cold or nerves, she could not tell. The rain continued to fall steadily, and she watched the traffic pattern, timing the lights and looking for the safest moment to cross. "You know," Henry said, having to speak louder over the rain, "when I was your age, this intersection had a stop sign instead of a traffic light. Things were simpler then. Of course, there were fewer cars, too." Elena smiled. "My grandmother always says the same thing about everything. She grew up here, too, and she's always telling stories about how different things used to be." "Smart woman, your grandmother." Henry nodded. "The old folks, we remember when people had more time for each other. Now everyone's always rushing somewhere." The light changed and Elena gently took Henry's arm. "Okay, let's go. Just take your time and I'll make sure no cars try to turn while we're crossing." They walked slowly across the street, Elena keeping one eye on Henry's careful steps and another on the cars waiting at the red light. A few drivers looked impatient, but most seemed to understand that the elderly man needed a little extra time. Elena waved gratefully to a truck driver who gave them an encouraging thumbs up. When they reached the other side safely, Henry stopped and took a moment to catch his breath. "Thank you so much, my dear. I don't know what I would have done without your help. These old bones don't move like they used to." Elena was about to say goodbye when she noticed Henry looking around with that same confused expression he had worn at the intersection. "The bank is just down this block," she said, pointing in the right direction. "Are you sure you can find it okay?" Henry squinted through the rain and shook his head slightly. "To be honest, I don't come into town very often anymore. Everything looks different in this weather." He paused and looked embarrassed. "I probably should not be out in this storm at all, but I had some important business to take care of at the bank." Elena checked her phone again. She was definitely going to be late now, but Henry seemed so uncertain and vulnerable standing there, in the rain. What if he got lost or confused again? What if he fell on the wet sidewalk? "Tell you what," Elena said, making a decision that surprised even her. "I'll walk you to the bank. It's not far, and this rain isn't getting any lighter." Henry's face lit up with gratitude. "You are very kind, but I don't want to make you late for wherever you're going. I'm sure a young person like you has important things to do." Elena thought about Mr. Garcia and the diner, but she also thought about her grandfather and how scared he used to get when he was confused in public. "It's okay," she said. "I have a few extra minutes, and my grandmother always taught me to help my elders." As they walked slowly down the sidewalk, Henry began to relax and share stories. He told Elena about his late wife, who had passed away 5 years ago, and how lonely the house felt without her. He mentioned that he lived outside of town now, on some land that had been in his family for decades. "I used to know everyone in this town," Henry said as they passed familiar buildings. "Now I hardly recognize anyone. All the young people move away after high school, looking for better opportunities in the big cities." Elena nodded, understanding that feeling completely. "I think about leaving sometimes too, but my family needs me here. My grandmother is sick, and my little brother, well, we only have each other now." Henry stopped walking for a moment and looked at Elena with new interest. "You take care of your family at your age? That's a big responsibility for someone so young." "Someone has to do it," Elena said simply. "When my parents died, my grandmother took us in. Now it's my turn to help." They reached the bank just as Elena's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mr. Garcia at the diner asking where she was. Elena quickly typed back that she was helping someone and would be there soon, hoping he would understand. Henry noticed her checking her phone. "I hope I haven't made you late for something important," he said with genuine concern. "Don't worry about it," Elena replied, though she was worried about it herself. "The most important thing is that you're safe and can take care of your business." Henry approached the bank doors. He turned back to Elena one more time. "You know, in all my years I've met very few young people with such kindness and respect. Your grandmother raised you well." Elena felt a warm feeling despite the cold rain. "Thank you, Mr. Martinez, that means a lot to me. Please call me Henry," he said with a smile. "And if you ever need anything at all, you just remember this old man who lives out on the Martinez property up on the hill." Elena nodded politely, assuming he lived in a small house somewhere in the rural area outside town. She said, "Goodbye," and started running toward the diner, her sneakers splashing through puddles as she tried to make up for lost time. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness had just connected her to the most successful and generous man in their entire county. The alarm clock buzzed at 4:30 a.m., just like it did every single day. Elena rolled out of her small bed, careful not to wake her little brother Miguel, who was sleeping on the mattress beside her. The tiny apartment was cold, and she could see her breath in the early morning air. Winter was always the hardest time for their family. She tiptoed to the kitchen, which was really just a corner of their main room with a small stove and an old refrigerator that hummed too loudly. The walls were thin, and she could hear Mrs. Rodriguez next door getting ready for her own early shift at the textile factory. Everyone in their building worked hard just to get by. Elena opened the refrigerator and found exactly what she expected. Not much. There was some leftover rice from dinner, half a carton of milk that would expire soon, and a few eggs. She made a quick decision that would become routine over the next few months. She would skip breakfast again and save the food for Miguel and their grandmother, Abuela Rosa. The shower in their bathroom only gave cold water now. The landlord had promised to fix it weeks ago, but Elena had learned not to expect much from promises. She washed quickly and put on her school uniform. The white shirt had been washed so many times it was more gray than white, and she had sewn a patch over a tear near the pocket. The navy skirt was too big for her now. She had lost weight over the past year, but new clothes were not even a possibility. Her school bag was heavy with textbooks that she had bought used from older students. Some pages were missing, and she often had to borrow notes from classmates to fill in the gaps. But Elena was smart, really smart, and she made it work. Her teachers often commented on how well she did despite everything. Before leaving for her first job, Elena checked on Abuela Rosa. Her grandmother had been sick for months now, and the medical bills were piling up like snow in winter. The old woman was sleeping peacefully, her breathing steady but labored. Elena left a glass of water and the small bottle of medicine they could barely afford on the nightstand. Miguel was still asleep, clutching the stuffed dog that had been his favorite toy since he was 3. At 12 years old, he was too old for stuffed animals, but Elena understood why he still needed it. They had both lost so much when their parents died in that terrible accident 3 years ago. Some nights, she still heard him crying quietly into his pillow, missing Mom and Dad. The walk to her first job took 20 minutes through streets that were still dark and empty. Elena worked at a small office building downtown, cleaning floors and emptying trash cans before the business people arrived. The security guard, Mr. Thompson, always nodded at her when she arrived. He was kind, but never asked too many questions, which Elena appreciated. The cleaning job was hard work, but Elena had gotten used to it. She mopped floors, cleaned bathrooms, and wiped down desks in 6 different offices. Her hands were often red and rough from the cleaning chemicals, but she always wore the thin rubber gloves the company provided. The pay was not much, but it was steady and every dollar mattered. By 7 a.m., Elena had finished cleaning and was walking quickly toward school. She usually grabbed a piece of fruit from the corner store if she had a few extra coins, but today her pockets were empty. Her stomach rumbled, reminding her that she had not eaten since dinner the night before. School was both Elena's favorite part of the day and her biggest challenge. She loved learning, especially history and literature. Her English teacher, Mrs. Johnson, often encouraged her to participate in class discussions, and Elena felt proud when she knew the answers. But it was hard to concentrate when she was hungry, and sometimes she caught herself thinking about bills and groceries instead of algebra problems. During lunch, Elena usually sat alone and pretended to be busy with homework while other students ate food from the cafeteria or lunches packed by their parents. She had qualified for free lunch, but the application process required so much paperwork and proof of income that she had not been able to complete it. The system was complicated, and Elena was too proud to ask for help from the school counselor. Her classmates were nice enough, but they lived in a different world. They talked about weekend trips to the mall, new clothes, and family vacations. Elena listened politely but rarely joined the conversation. What could she say? That she spent weekends working and taking care of her sick grandmother? That her idea of entertainment was borrowing books from the library because they could not afford cable television? After school, Elena had exactly 30 minutes to get home, check on Abuela Rosa and Miguel, and then rush to her second job. The diner where she worked was old and not very busy, but the owner, Mr. Garcia, was fair and paid her on time every week. She waited tables, washed dishes, and cleaned the kitchen until 9 p.m. every night except Sunday. The diner attracted mostly truck drivers and construction workers who were tired after long days. Most customers were polite, but the tips were small. Elena had learned to smile even when her feet hurt and she felt exhausted. Every tip, even 50 cents, helped pay for groceries or medicine for Abuela Rosa. One evening, a customer left a $20 tip by mistake, thinking it was a $5 bill. Elena ran after him to return the money, even though $20 would have bought groceries for 3 days. The man was so surprised by her honesty that he came back the next week and always asked to sit at her table. Small acts of kindness like this reminded Elena that good people existed everywhere. By the time Elena got home each night, Miguel had usually finished his homework and was watching their old television. She always asked about his day and helped with any assignments he was struggling with. Miguel was a good student, but Elena worried about him. He was growing up too fast, taking on responsibilities that boys his age should not have to think about. Abuela Rosa tried to help as much as she could, but her illness made even simple tasks difficult. She had raised Elena and Miguel after their parents died, using her small Social Security check and savings that disappeared quickly. The old woman felt guilty about being a burden, but Elena always reminded her that family takes care of family. Weekend. Mornings were different from school days, but not easier. Elena cleaned their small apartment, did laundry at the building's shared machines, and grocery shopped with a carefully planned list and exact change. She had become an expert at finding bargains and making meals stretch across several days. Despite everything, Elena never complained. She had learned that complaining changed nothing, but working hard could change everything. She dreamed of going to college someday, maybe becoming a teacher like Mrs. Johnson. It seemed impossible with no money for tuition, but Elena had learned that impossible things sometimes become possible if you work hard enough and never give up. Every night before falling asleep, Elena made the same promise to herself. Tomorrow would be better. Somehow, some way, she would find a way to give Miguel and Abuela Rosa the life they deserved. She just had to keep working, keep believing, and keep hoping that their luck would change. Little did Elena know that her biggest opportunity was walking slowly down the street just a few blocks away, struggling with a simple task that would soon change all their lives forever.